So, all right. Well, we've been spending time this month going through the Max Lucado book, Taming Your Thoughts, and that's been our inspiration and our theme for services all month. Some of you have been reading the book and following along that way, and our Wednesday night discussions have been great on Wednesday daytime and night. Have been some great discussions on this book and this theme along the way, and we have a couple more weeks of it. But we get to a point in the book where we've talked the last couple weeks about 3 tools, and that's what Max kind of puts the whole book around is 3 tools to help tame your mind. And each of the last 3 weeks, we have talked about those things. And so this week and the next couple of weeks, we're going to look at some areas, some specific areas, and how some of those tools might help in those areas. And so today we get to a fun one that doesn't affect anybody in here, anxiety and worry, right? Nobody in here ever has anxiety or worry about anything, do you? 2 men were talking one time, and the one man said to his friend, "I'm really in trouble. I have a mountain of credit card debt. I lost my job. My car is being repossessed. My house is in foreclosure. But guess what? I'm not worried about any of it." His friend said, "Well, how can you not be worried?" He said, "Well, I've hired a professional worrier. He does all the worrying for me." His friend was like, "Wow, that's fantastic. I need to get one of those. How much does that cost?" Oh, it's a bargain. It's only $50,000 a year," the man says. The friend scratches his head and says, "Wait a minute. You just said you have no money. How are you going to pay for him?" "Well, that's for him to worry about." Right? And so worry affects us all. It affects us all in different ways. Matter of fact, a dose of anxiety, a dose of worry in our life is actually helpful, and it's part of what we are made to be, that God has designed us, so that way when we do get stress and other things pressuring in on us, we're not overcome by it. We can deal with it, and we can move on with life. The problem is that for many of us, we allow those worries and that anxiety to continue to build up in us, and then we never get a break from them. Healthy anxiety challenges us and keeps us moving forward. Unhealthy anxiety is like an alarm system that never turns off, and you don't know the code anymore. And so we look at those 2 things when it comes to anxiety, and we are meant to be healthy and rise up to challenges, and we don't have to always have that alarm blaring in us. And so today we're going to look at a story of Jesus and his disciples and how they dealt with a highly anxious moment in their ministry together, and what that looks like in relation to us and our anxiety. So Mark chapter 4 is where we'll be at today. Mark 4, verses 35 to 41. And it reads, "Later that day, when evening came, Jesus said to them, 'Let's cross over to the other side of the lake.' They left the crowd and took him in the boat just as he was. Other boats followed along. Gale-force winds arose, and waves crashed against the boat, so the boat was swamped. But Jesus was in the rear of the boat, sleeping on a pillow. They woke him up and said, 'Teacher, don't you care that we're drowning?' He got up and gave orders to the wind, and he said to the lake, 'Silence, be still.' The wind settled down there, and there was a great calm. Jesus asked them, 'Why are you frightened? Don't you have faith yet?' Overcome with awe, they said to each other, 'Who then is this? Even the wind and the sea obey him.'" The word of the Lord for us today. Imagine the anxiety of the disciples. Imagine this whole ordeal is going on, and you're in that boat with them. You're one of the disciples. You're with Jesus. You've been teaching and you've been teaching people and healing people and watching and helping others at Kalispell First Church of the Nazarene for a few days. And then all of a sudden it's time for you to go to the Pablo Church of the Nazarene. And so to get to the Pablo Church of the Nazarene, you're not going to walk all the way around the lake. It's before cars. And so the best way to get across is to take a boat across, right? And so you get into that boat in Summers Bay, and the day is clear and calm. It is refreshing to kind of just be on the lake. Then all of a sudden in the middle of your trip, the winds pick up. The boat then is being pushed back and forth by the winds, that the waves are now building up and slamming the boat back and forth as well. and you're thinking, wow, we're all going to die, right? We're going to sink here. Imagine the anxiety level goes from 0 to 100 in about 3 seconds for you. We all feel the pressures of life, just like the disciples would have felt here at this time. We might be walking down the street, and all of a sudden, boom, you're hit with something. The wind and the waves of anxious thoughts come and flood your mind. Maybe you receive a phone call from a doctor with some test results. Maybe you received a text message from someone who was your friend and now is telling you in a text message they're no longer going to be your friend. Maybe it's thinking about that phone call you didn't get at the holidays from a family member who is no longer talking to you. Maybe it's you fill in the blank. I'm sure we all have them. And if that's not bad enough, we're not hit by those personal things. We're constantly then bombarded with the craziness of the world around us. We have wars going on. We have natural disasters all around us. We have political unrest. We have concerns for school safety. We have people in authority who are abusing power. It's easy to get overwhelmed as we get just hit wave after wave and wind after wind of all the things that are going on around us. That it's no wonder that we see a rise in the treatment of people who need anxiety help and help with their worries and their frustrations. It's no wonder that each generation we seem to have a rise in the medication that is being given out. That there's this constant feeling now of not good news, but of being alone and being frustrated, and that being overwhelmed by all that we see. And that's where we are in today's passage. The disciples are fully engulfed in the middle of the storm. They are fully filled with their anxiety and their worry about what is going to happen. And the panic starts to come in, right? The panic is, we're all going to die. We need to do something about this. And while they're all panicking, while they're all frustrated with it, what does it say Jesus is doing? Verse 38. He's sleeping on a pillow. Jesus was in the rear of the boat, sleeping on a pillow. Don't you hate it when you're in the middle of a crisis? When you're in the middle of a frustrating point and anxiousness in you, and there's one person who just seems to be calm and not worried about it? Doesn't that just get kind of, maybe it's just me, you're like, ugh. I found myself at a frustrating point like that a couple years ago. Many of you know I spent 5 years serving our district, the Rocky Mountain District of the Church of the Nazarene, as the district secretary. And there's lots of jobs involved that has a high stress and pressure and all kinds of things. But one of those responsibilities is at our annual district meetings at district assembly. And a couple years ago, our district superintendent and a few other leaders decided we needed to have a family camp and district assembly, which is great, sounds good. But when you're in charge of the business meeting and there's certain specifications and things that go into that business meeting, and now you're just told, well, we'll be under a tent. We'll see what happens. I'm not wired that way. I'm not wired that way, and especially when I got pressure from a general superintendent all the way down to make things right. And so we get to the ordination service. And as we get to the ordination service, that's the end of district assembly. And it's the time where we then celebrate those who are being ordained as new ministers in the Church of the Nazarene. These people have worked for years to get to this point to be ordained. They've gone through classes, they've gone through internships, they've worked in churches, they've done all kinds of things. They've been interviewed by a board every year, all those kind of things. And so this service is very important. It's a time of ritual and a time of celebration, but it's very important. And so then I was thrown a little bit of a curveball when I'm told, all right, we're going to have this service inside this big tent, and you're going to have to figure out how to make it flow. All right? Well, we got tables set up. Well, okay. And I had all these things, not to mention the fact that I had many other voices then speaking into me, trying to tell me how this service should be done. That I just got to that boiling point where I frantically just told someone, I just can't, I got it, all this. And the person looked me straight in the eyes, calmly, as he was listening to everything I said, and said, okay, Joe, we'll get it done, right? A calm voice in the middle of the storm. We don't want that. We want you to empathize with me. I want you to be out of sorts too, and let's tackle this storm together. That's what the disciples are looking for. Jesus is asleep. Jesus, why are you asleep? Why aren't you up caring about this? We're all going to die. This is going to be hard. We're not sure what to do. Why are you sleeping? And they even express that to Jesus as they wake him up. I wonder who got picked, right? Not it. Nope, not me. You. It was probably Peter, from what we know of the disciples. Peter had to go wake him up. And when Peter wakes him up, it says in the end of verse 38, it says that they said, "Teacher, don't you care that we're drowning?" That question really hits the heart of this whole story. It hits the heart of who we are when we're filled with anxiety, when we're filled with worry. Don't you care that we're drowning? There's no questioning his power. There's no questioning that Jesus could do something here. But what they're questioning is, Jesus, do you care? Like, you're sleeping. Do you even care what we have going on? And the truth is, Jesus' silence never meant an absence, though. That when we're in the middle of a time of anxiety and worry and fret, that even in the middle of that, even though God may be silent to us in that moment, it doesn't mean he's not with us. It doesn't mean he's not there in the boat through the storm with us. The storm didn't catch Jesus off guard. The waves didn't change his commitment to them. Jesus cares even when he's quiet. He is present even when it feels like he's not responding fast enough to us. And he is still Lord even when the storm seems like it's winning. That Jesus' silence didn't mean he didn't care. It meant the storm never was in control. Silence didn't mean that Jesus didn't care. It meant the storm was never in control. Jesus knew what he could do. Jesus knew that they were okay. But he let that happen to help teach them. And here's what matters even most. Even before the storm stopped, one thing was already true. The disciples, in the middle of that storm, in the middle of that frustration, even though Jesus was quiet, Jesus was sleeping, they were never alone in that boat. Just like in the middle of what we have going on, in the middle of our times of anxiousness and worry, we are never alone. When you know who is with you, it changes your entire perspective. When you know who is in control, you interpret the things in front of you different. As I look and I am frustrated by all the things that have to happen for this event to go on, this ordination service to happen, and I get how I get, right? My friend was like, "Okay, Joe, we got this." That calming right in the middle of it to remind me that we'll get there, to remind me that it will happen. That really reminds me when we get to an ordination service, and I say this sometimes when I talk to couples who are getting married, like especially when they go, "My family's crazy and I don't know what will happen at the wedding." And you go, "Hey, as long as I have the chance to do the vows and the ring ceremony over you and you say I do, everything else can be crazy." But we have to remember that in the middle of that storm, that Jesus is there for us. And so we've talked the last 3 weeks about 3 practices that will help us in those times when we're feeling anxious and worried and frustrated. And you can pick one of those 3 to help guide you through it. The first one we talked about was practice picky thinking. That when Jesus is in the boat, not every thought that comes crashing in gets to take the wheel there. That picky thinking isn't denial. It isn't saying this stuff is not here, it's not real. My anxiety is not real. It's just saying I don't put my trust in my anxiety, I put my trust in Jesus. And so, practicing picky thinking, it's choosing to listen to the voice of Jesus over the noise of your storm. That whatever you have going on. I stood there with my friend being a calm presence in the midst of my storm. I had to decide what really needed to be said and what really needed to be addressed. I wanted to shout, "Don't you care that we're drowning?" But that wouldn't have helped him much because that's not who he is. He helped me snap kind of out of it and say, "All right, that's fine. You got all that stuff, but what needs to happen now to get this event to happen? What needs to be set up? Where do chairs need to be put? Where are the aisles going to be? Where are these things?" And so I had to, at that moment with that discussion, had to then block out the thoughts in my mind that weren't allowed. That I had to practice picky thinking and say, all right, this anxiousness and this nervousness, these things had to go away, and I have to let the thoughts through that focus on getting this event done. And so we talked about that a couple weeks ago, about how picky thinking is meaning like I'm putting my thoughts through the TSA at the airport. There are guidelines, and if they don't meet the guidelines, they don't get on the plane. And so we practice picky thinking. It's not denial. It's not pretending. It's not just putting up a smile and hurting on the inside. But picky thinking is choosing which voice gets authority. Is it fear or is it Jesus? And that's what the disciples have to face there. The second thing that we talked about on Sunday, or a couple Sundays ago, was we had to identify our UFOs, right? Our untruths, our false narratives, and our overreactions. That anxiety tells us a story. It likes to tell us a story and make us feel alone and isolated and feel like nobody cares and feel like we can't control anything and everything is just crazy out there. That we have these stories that everything is falling apart, or if I don't do my part, everything depends on me, then everything will go wrong if I don't do this right. But when Jesus is with us, those stories don't get the final word. The annual ordination service is a very important service, like I said earlier. It's meaningful, it's symbolic, it's full of expectations. This particular year, the logistics were a lot different because we were under a tent at a family camp meeting. The pressure just started building, and the anxiety started building, and the stories tried to get into me to kind of freeze me in place. And so then, if I was using this tool here, here's what my UFOs would look like in this story. The untruth. No one is really helping me. I have to figure this all out on my own. The false narrative. If this isn't done perfectly, then I failed everybody. The overreaction. Stress spilling out onto people who didn't deserve it. And so in the middle of that storm, all three of those things, I had to identify and be able to know what I needed next. And then my friend was there just to say, okay, Joe, we'll get it done. That confidence that he helped remind me of. That calm voice that cut through all the noise and all the anxiety. It forced me to slow down and actually look and see what was true about what was going on around us. To get rid of that false narrative and slow down on that overreaction at that time. That I had to let that anxiety, push that anxiety out, and then look at the reality around us and realize that anxiety wasn't the reality of what was going on. That moment helped me take a breath, helped me reassess, helped me respond instead of react. And that's exactly what anxiety was doing with the disciples on the boat. The storm wasn't just outside of them, but it was shaping their minds. It was shaping their faith in Jesus. That as they were on that boat and Jesus was sleeping, do you even care that we're about to die? Shows that they're putting their trust in their anxiety of the situation. They're saying things like, we're alone, like this is the end, that Jesus doesn't care, we're going to die. But none of these things were true. Why were they not true? Because Jesus was in the boat with them. Because Jesus was with them through what they were going through. And so they needed to be reminded of that. The third tool we just talked about last week, uproot and replant. That once the false thoughts are exposed, they're not just ignored, they're not just swept under the carpet. When those false thoughts come into our mind and we identify those UFOs, we then need to take them out and replace them. Paul says, and we've been talking about this for the last month, right? Paul says we're transformed by the renewing of our minds found in Christ Jesus. And that we also are then able, because of that, to take every thought captive and bring it under the authority of Christ. The disciples wake up Jesus, don't you even care that we're about to die? Jesus gets up and he shows them that he has the authority to take care of the situation. He has the authority to provide for them. I had to uproot the negative thoughts that I was thinking about getting ready for that ceremony and that anxiousness. The thoughts that I would be judged based on how everything went, that my job depended on how things turned out. And I had to replant it with thoughts that reminded me that God was here working through me and that God was honored that I was serving him and serving the people of our district in this way. That I then had to use the mind that he gave me to problem solve, to find those solutions so that we could have this service and have it come together. And so what we notice when we uproot and we replant is we notice that peace grows when the soil of our mind is filled with truth and not fear. The disciples wake Jesus up. He slowly gets up and he assesses the situation around them. Then he does something incredible, right? Verse 39, he said to the lake, "Silence, be still." He commands them with power and authority. And the incredible thing is, it continues to say, the wind settled down and there was a great calm. He made a command over the things that were creating anxiety for the disciples in this story, and it obeyed him. And so when we face those times of anxiety and nervousness, and we're overcome by those things that try to pound against us, like the wind and the waves, that we have a peace and a calm that can come into us. We need to get rid of those things in us that want to bring us down. We need to get rid of those things around us that are trying to push us away. And with the authority and with the power and with the mind of Christ, we uproot them and we replant them with the things of Jesus, with the power that he shows and the commands that he shows for us. Notice that Jesus doesn't calm the storm until after the disciples bring their fear to him. Maybe, is Jesus just pretending to sleep? He's like, hey, we're in a rough situation here, but I'm going to stay over here and see what the disciples do. And then he waits till they come to him. And when they come to him, then he gets up and does more than what they were expecting. It wasn't until they had the courage to come before God honestly and say, God, we are struggling here. This is frustrating us. This is my anxiety. This is my worry. And then when they're honest, that's when the peace of Christ comes in. That's when he calms those waves and that wind in our minds to show us his peace and his ways. These tools, these three tools we've been talking about, they don't earn peace, but they help us live in the peace Jesus already brings into the boat. They help us in the times of need, that Jesus is already there in the boat with us. But he brings them with us. And so these tools, they don't earn it, but they help us in coming and realizing it. The disciples are overcome with awe as they see all of this happening around them. We all would be if we were in that situation. Jesus is able to identify the source of their anxieties, and then he has the power to overcome them. And when we say yes to Jesus, when we say, Jesus, I want to follow you with my life, that my ways haven't been working, and I need your peace in my mind and in my life, when we say that, then Jesus promises us that he will bring his peace to us, and that he will give that to us. That doesn't mean that all anxiety instantly disappears. It doesn't mean that we still won't have times where you're faced with worry. But what it means is that you have one more power on your side to help you overcome it, to help you get through it. You don't have to face it alone. You don't have to be you against the world, but you have people on your side now who can help you reshape the way that you think and the way that you do stuff. And anytime that those anxieties, they come back and they feel overwhelming, then you can have the power of Christ and the mind of Christ to identify them and to push them away. And we also know that sometimes that anxiety and that worry gets so overwhelming in life. Especially we always, this time of year, we get to the cold and we get to the cloudy and we get trapped inside more and we get trapped in our thoughts more because of that. And so if you are someone who is struggling and you're like, hey, I'm trying these things and God's working, but I just feel like I'm struggling too much, then I urge you to find a trusted friend who you can talk to about it. I urge you to find a licensed counselor who can help you. There's no shame in that, and we believe in the Church of the Nazarene that God has given people the minds to be able to help us in these situations. Just like we would go to a doctor for a physical problem, we can go to a doctor for a mental health problem. And we can use prescription drugs or other things, not abuse, but use what's needed to help us get through those times. And so please, if you are struggling with it and you're like, hey, I've been trying this stuff, but it's still so overwhelming, it's not necessarily you, but it's the situation, and maybe you need a little extra help. And so find that help if you can. Jesus doesn't leave you alone in the boat. He doesn't say, all right, I calmed the waves, what more do you want from me? But he's there to guide you through it and walk you through it, and so find that help if you need it. The disciples, as they're there with Jesus, and Jesus does this great miracle in front of them and tames their anxiety, The disciples are left wondering about Jesus some more, as if, they've already been traveling with him for a while, but they still don't quite get it. Verse 41 of today. Who then is this? Even the wind and the sea obey him. Anxious thoughts will come flooding in at all kinds of times. At times when we're not expecting it. At times when we're not sure what to do with them. If you try to solve all these problems on your own, then we end up just digging deeper and deeper. But when we find the peace of Christ with us, then we know we can overcome them. If you're trying to find peace in the world's ways, in the world's way of thinking, then you're going to continue to dig. If your peace depends on world circumstances, if your peace depends on the weather today, if your peace depends on if traffic is good on the way to work, if your peace depends on if your spouse is happy, if your peace depends, all those kind of things, then you're not going to find what you need and the help that you need. If your peace is an if peace, then you need to exchange it for his peace. That Jesus says in John 14, he says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. We've talked this month about the power of Christ is ours. The mind of Christ is available to us. The peace of Christ is available to help us in all these situations. And so as we enter into our reflection time this morning, I want to pause for a moment, and I want you just to kind of sit there and close your eyes for a moment. I want you to spend some time quietly naming what is the loudest storm that's been brewing in your life this last week. Just pause for a moment and think about what is that anxious thought, what is that fear that keeps coming back, what is that one thing that I need Jesus to help me with. And then as that comes into your mind, I want you to remember this. Jesus is already in the boat with you in the middle of that storm. Whatever that storm looks like for you. The disciples didn't wake him with perfect faith. The disciples weren't sure what they were doing. They're just waking up Jesus. They brought him their fear. They brought him their greatest anxiety. And that was enough. Because Jesus is in the boat, fear doesn't get the final word. You just need to bring it to him and start working with him through it all. And so maybe for some of you, it's being willing just to say, Jesus, I need to put my full trust in you. Whether you're in person or online, taking a moment to say, am I putting my full trust in Jesus? And if not, then I need to start there. Jesus, I want you in my boat. I want to know what it means to follow you. I want to know what it means to have your peace in my life, and ask him for that. If you've been following him for a while and you're like, I just am in a moment, I am in a time where just things are a little overwhelming, then maybe today's a good reminder of, Jesus, help me wake you up in my boat. Help me wake you up so that I hear from you and I know with confidence that you are here. Because Jesus is in the boat, fear doesn't get the final word. Please stand as we sing this song together. And this song today is more of a prayer. I want it to be more of a prayer and a blessing over us. That the song, I Speak Jesus, is not denying that the storm is there, but it's declaring that in the middle of the storm, fear doesn't get the final word. The name of Jesus does. So over your anxiety, over your situation, over your fear, we speak the name of Jesus. Because when he speaks, the wind and the waves listen. So sing this song as that closing prayer. If you need to come and pray at the altars, feel free to. If you need to talk to me about what that means and what that looks like, I'm right here. And then after the song, I will close us in our time of prayer together.